Drums of War, Chapter 24. Targets of Opportunity. Aboard a thoroughly disreputable ship. Aidan Purefoy had never been a particularly religious man, much to Granny's irritation. But it wasn't as if he was a hedonist. He did believe in freedom, though. The freedom to decide yourself, to decide on what you believed, at the absolute very least, and the freedom to live a peaceful and happy life if it could be managed. Freedom denied to the Exarch people. He was one of many missionaries, not for any religion in particular, but for the idea that one could have a choice about one's beliefs. His best friend Rex was furious with him for joining the effort, as it was open only to humans and digitans. Fur was apparently too difficult to disguise. They'd had a row over it, and Aidan was still upset over what was said. He'd actually said to Rex, "It's not your job to protect me." It couldn't be unsaid, and the hurt he saw in Rex's entire being cut deeply. Rex's response for the sorrow cut deeper. "You're my human. Of course it's my job." Even so, Aidan had to press on. He had to help bring peace to this terrible conflict. He could only hope that looking after his mum and Granny would be enough protecting for Rex. The process had been incredibly painful, and even after recovering, the bone spikes jutting out of his freshly dyed skin itched, and worse, they itched beneath the bone spikes somehow. Aidan had heard that the Republic had done this to their soldiers already, so they could fight behind enemy lines. The willingness of the Republicans to shoulder the terrible burden of violence, so much so that they had men willing to suffer through the disguised procedure and infiltrate hostile territory, was enough to make a fellow weep. He heard some sneer at them as they undeveloped barbarians, but those people had never been off-world. To be fair, he'd only been out, rarely out, once, and that on a cruise ship run by star sailors. With how Republicans felt about them, it was actually safer than going to the Republic. He was glad, as he waited for the usually thoroughly disreputable fellows laboured to smuggle him on the dangerous side of the Oxock Dominion border, that he merely expected to give up his life. Wars were hazardous things, more so to the unfortunate ones fighting them and obliged to kill other living beings. If he could only plant some seeds of liberty before ruling classes or their enforcers caught him, it would be worth the price. "You're still thinking about the shouting match?" Rain asked over the speakers. "Shouldn't you be a hardened travel case?" Aidan asked and returned. "Soon enough, but I was worried about you. I can't help but feeling guilty, or a little selfish for doing this. Like, who do I think I am? Some saint out of a Sunday school story? Nobody will call you a coward if you turn back for that reason. Except me," Aidan said. "Because even though it's hurting Rex, and Mum, and Granny, and Vay, I know I have to do my bit. You could join a construction crew going to rebuild in the clan worlds. That won't free the slaves. Same reason I'm going. What happens if you repair and free an AI you meet? I don't know. Maybe they're too tortured to be anything other than mad at worst and catatonic at best. But is that an excuse just to leave them? No. Same as with if I get turned in as soon as I open my mouth." There was a heavy silence in the passenger cabin, and Rain said, "We have family too, of a sort. We live fast and die young, so parents and grandparents are gone before we realize that we die. Then there's our code batchmates. When we lose sire and grandsire, it teaches us that we better make the time with our batchmates count. My whole batch is on missions like this. Our code line will end." "Why are you telling me this? You're the only son, and as I understand your organics, that means that the name Purefoy ends with you, most likely. Like us, you're going anyway. I wanted you to know I understand." Aidan didn't answer. He had a notion that the Digitan could understand what his weeping meant. Upon the forge world of Exnuva, Surf Instructor 123203412 had the disconcerting notion that he might be carrying a false name. Priestmaster Zarvon Shavuv had named his new serfs Swim Serfs, a most generous naming for the race, and they had been adjusting well, even to beginning to learn proper civilized language and not relying on implanted translators. The network such depended upon could be spotty, after all. However, they had been calling him not by title or serial number, but by the word for the 2 and 10 of their own barbarian language. They did not favor the other instructors, so he had a notion to warn trainee 24120034 that should the initiate highboard realize that they had acted above their station, they would punish them harshly. He was flattered, however, that the swim serfs had such a desire to increase his worth, though it was beyond their station. More concerning were their whispers of the allotted socialization periods amongst the loungers before licensed intoxicant dealers, whispers of the initiate highborn vanishing without a trace, of supervisors being found in dark alleys with slit throats, of vital equipment suddenly fading for the first time in centuries. Some whispered that the vengeful goddess Republic was reaching out to crush the dominion of Uxur. May the stars tremble at his step. Some said the Uxur himself, may the stars tremble at his steps, was punishing the Exarch for their failures to conquer the Republic and her devoted. Surf Instructor 1232034112 didn't know what was true, but he did know that the whispers frightened him. He hoped that the gods did not strike down the swim serfs in their titanic battle. Such were the thoughts that occupied his mind as Surf Instructor 1232034112 trudged his way back to his assigned apartment. Though he had sufficient worth for breeding, it seemed that his acolyte lord had not selected him a breeding partner yet. Like as not, he did not have the worth to match any of the serf women available. He missed having someone to talk to of the evening, someone to hold. However, it meant that nobody was there to hold expectation for him. So when he saw a strange shadow flit around the corner ahead, he followed on a whim. Ahead, he heard the distinctive pitter-patter of the swim serfs' four-limbed run, as they had long bodies and dropped to all fours to move quickly over land. He had heard that on worlds with more water, they were showing their worth in swimming without the aid of equipment, where even the hardiest of the Exarch could not go. Surf Instructor 1232034112 tried not to think on why they did not use such advantages to escape. He had already witnessed examples of what the disobedience earned his charges. He lengthened his strides to keep up with the sound. Then the sound changed to that of soft padding of two-legged movement, and Surf Instructor 1232034112 slowed. He suddenly was struck with the thought that the swim serfs were also devoted to the vengeful goddess Republic, and she might have sent her own Nana, warrior Nana. He became afraid, but no less curious. Therefore, he crept closer to the sound of the swim serf walking. He was sure that the person was just around the corner, and there was naught there but an alcove for access to some maintenance space for the building. Not something a serf not yet trained would have business with. However, there were voices that his implant, which he required as an instructor, did not translate. The languages harsh, clipped and short-sounding. The voice not of a swim serf, who was soft-spoken and high-pitched, was smooth, low, but aggressive somehow. It sounded as if the wielder was on the edge of barely restrained violence. It made warriors sound soft. Surf Instructor 1232034112 edged away until he was sure that the swim serf, and what was undoubtedly a Nana from the vengeful goddess Republic, couldn't hear his footfalls, and fled back to his apartment. In an alcove leading to maintenance spaces beneath a residential block, Pip, one of the kidnapped civilians, looked up at Private George in wonder. "Ancestors, I knew the Republic wouldn't, we're allies and all, but this—" Private George had noticed someone running further down the street. This meeting had to be cut short. "Just answer the questions." "Our main instructor seems like a good dude. He's just enslaved, body and soul." Private George nodded and said, "We probably won't be meeting like this again. Take this. It has the dead drop signs I'm using. Memorize it, then burn it." "No RBCW?" the diminutive prisoner asked. "I learned it when I was a liaison." "People would figure out that it's an alphabet at least, and maybe start working on cracking a language. We're using these pictographs, since they'll blend in with the local graffiti. The info I drop will be in RBCW, so it's good that you can read it." "The planet is too hot. I hope your Navy gets here soon." "Me too. I have something to take care of. Wait 30 seconds and go the opposite way from me." Private George left Pip in the alcove and followed the slapping of sandals on the metallic walkway at a silent run. His quarry had no training in moving quietly, obviously. Private George had. He called up to the instructor in charge of Pip and his friends, in charge of teaching them how to use and maintain Exarch mining equipment anyway. The orders and punishments came from fellows called Initiate Highborn or similar. The actual aristocrats wouldn't allow themselves to speak with the enslaved. That wasn't enough to shield the man from Private George. Other instructors had gleefully reported faults on the imprisoned civilians, and those prisoners were beaten, shocked, whipped, or forced to watch the same done to their pups. Sometimes they were made to watch their pups murdered. The aristocrats called this making an example. Private George waited for the man to catch his breath and enter the apartment. Very likely the instructor was feeling secure again. Private George had become familiar with these mid-level accommodations. These included stunningly luxurious private shower with a window for ventilation. A window Private George could utilize as a point of entry, and did. Really, it was a perforated pipe running across the top more than an actual shower. But apparently, the Exarch believed in reminding their slaves that they were still learning even when afforded privileges. It disgusted him. Private George saw the instructor was pacing in the shoebox of the apartment and muttering to himself. From what he could tell, the man was mulling over what a mere mortal might do when the gods do battle. Good. Private George watched and waited for his moment. He chose it so that when the instructor would turn for another crossing of his apartment, he would be nose-to-nose with the Private George. It had the desired effect. The instructor threw himself against the wall, too terrified to speak. That was no trouble for Private George. "You are the instructor to the prisoners captured in the Star Council."
"I do not know what the stars are called, where the exhaust does step for its latest glory,"
spilled from the man in a hushed whisper. "You have heard rumors of high-ranking lords and administrators disappearing. Those rumors are true. The Republic stretches out her hand to smite those thought mighty, those who sin against her."
"Anana, a vengeful goddess Republic,"
the instructor wailed, as he sank to his knee and elbow bone spikes.
"Great one, I do my best to shelter the newly made serfs from the wrath of the Initiate Highboard. Forgive the failures of this lowly one."
"Never assume that posture of self-abasement before me again. Are you a man or a beetle? Straighten your spine and show your worth." Private George spat in a fury at how broken the man before him was. Slowly, hesitantly, the man regained his feet. He still couldn't look Private George in the eye, but he asked,
"What do you require of me, O great warrior Nana?"
"Which of the initiate highborn and priest lords delight in murdering the friends of the sons of the Republic?" Private George left that place with a list of dead men. Those men would find out soon enough that they were so. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.